Hey guys, how's it going? So today I want to talk about whether or not it's too late in the season to plant. So we're at the end of October, we're consistently freezing at night. We've had several nights in the low 20s already. And so I just wanted to talk about it because I do see questions come through from time to time about how risky it is and if it's okay to plant, how late is too late to plant. So you might be like me, you may have had plants sitting somewhere in a hoard since spring. I've had these winterberry hollies, these are called berry poppins, since March. The reason I still have them is because I couldn't really figure out where I wanted to put them. Maybe you're in that situation. Maybe you found like an end of season plant sale and you got a bunch of beautiful things that you've really wanted and now you really want to treat them nice and make sure that they survive to the next year. Whatever the case may be, a lot of times us gardeners end up with a stash of plants that we don't really know what to do with. So I want to go through several options. The first and best option is if you have the ability to dig a hole still, if your ground isn't frozen yet, put your plants in the ground because they're so much better insulated with soil all the way around their root ball as opposed to being exposed possibly to the elements through these thin nursery cans. And so that is definitely the best thing to do. Now, if you are planting them, which I'll talk a little bit more about that when I actually plant them in the ground, you do want to make sure to keep them moist. There are a few exceptions to that, like Caryopteris and butterfly bushes. They're better off planted early on in the spring. If you do get a hold of those, you don't want to make sure the soil's too wet around them, but most everything else, you want to make sure that you just keep them evenly moist, not too soggy, and then put a nice layer of mulch around the base of the plant, like a 2-inch layer of shredded bark mulch. That helps keep moisture in. It helps insulate the root ball. So I'm going to be doing that today. I have to go grab my mulch. I didn't have enough room in my cart. The second option you can do is if you have an area, like if you can't get them in the ground, if you have a cold frame, an unheated shed or garage, you can store them in that area. And I do that with a lot of plants too. In our cold frame, it's not heated. I just kind of huddle my plants in there and it usually keeps everything about 20 degrees warmer than the ambient temperature outside. And that tends to, like things tend to come out alive out of the cold frame. If you have evergreens or anything like that, you do need to make sure that they are getting a little bit of light. You can't just put those in a dark place for the whole winter because they still have leaves that need to take in the light. So that is a really good option if you have the ability to do that. Now in areas like mine, I'm zone 5, most plants that I'm putting in the ground that I want to live from year to year, they need a cold dormant period. So they need the winter time to do that. So you don't want to put them somewhere warm. You want to make sure that they're in a colder place, not as cold as outside, but colder than like an inside temperature, because if you store them somewhere warm, they might be tricked into thinking it's, you know, spring, and they might start pushing growth and it can kind of disrupt the cycle of your plant and kind of stress them out. The third thing you can do if you don't have any cold place to store them or you can't put them in the ground, you can huddle them all together in a group somewhere. This is what we do at the garden center. Anything that's left over, we huddle in a big group and then we line the whole thing with mulch bags or soil bags, whatever we have on hand. So like I usually have a stack of soil or a stack of mulch behind our barn. So I would put all the pots together and then I would just lay mulch bags around the outside because it provides a little bit of extra insulation. With any plants, even the ones like in the huddle or the ones in the cold frame, you do want to make sure to keep them on a water schedule as well. And then the fourth thing you can do is you can hill them in. And that's basically just digging a hole somewhere, putting the whole thing down in it, just planting it in its pot essentially, just so that there's soil all the way around the can, providing that insulation. In that case, you also want to make sure that they're staying moist, that they don't dry out completely. But when they're covered with soil, I mean, you're not covering the foliage, you're not covering the top, you're just covering the pot as if you were planting it in the ground. For real, except in the spring you can pull it out easily in its nursery container and take it to where you want it to go. So those are the 4 options that I am familiar with. There's probably other ways to do it, but today I am planting these berry poppins in the ground because our ground is not frozen yet, and I finally figured out where I want them to go. We're over here on the west side, and I planted 3 evergreens in here this spring. One of them did not survive, and I think it was my fault because I didn't check the water around. I think it was staying too wet right here. So I'm going to replace that this next spring, hopefully. So I've got a little trio of these berry poppins that I think will be really beautiful right here because they're going to provide so much winter interest. Look at those berries. So I'm going to give you just a little bit of information on these just because I think they're a really neat plant and I finally got my hands on some, and that's why I've held on to them for months, because I got them while the getting was good, and now I'm ready to put them in. So these are a zone 3 through 9, which is awesome. So like I said, I garden in a zone 5, which means I'm not going to stress at all about putting these in the ground because they're so extremely winter hardy. And these are not like your traditional winterberry hollies that get super big. These grow about 3 to 4 feet tall and wide. So they'll just be like this nice shrub in here. I've got one right over here that's kind of in between these evergreens and by this autumn brilliant serviceberry that's coloring up so beautifully. I'm so happy with this. And then this other one over here, which I've got my hot and cold Nephofia, which is blooming end of October. Look at this. Isn't that the coolest? I'm really impressed with this. And I've got a black cat pussy willow and a spring snow crabapple right here. So just to give you an idea of what I've got planted around. So these like a full sun or part sun situation. So I think they'll be happy here, and they're really good in wet soils. And like I said, this was staying too wet. I think that these are going to be very, very happy here. You do have to have a male pollinator though. These are the female plants. So you have to have a male within 50 feet. One male will pollinate up to, I think, 5 females. So I've got my Mr. Poppins right here, which has already lost all of his leaves. I'm going to pop him right over the fence. These are not as showy of a shrub. So the fun thing about it is you can put your showy shrubs where you want them to be seen. And then you can tuck this one, as long as it's within 50 feet, you can tuck it somewhere where it won't be seen quite as much. So what I mean by needing a male pollinator, you don't need a male pollinator in order for these shrubs to survive, but you need one in order for them to pollinate and create these red berries, which is why we buy this plant in the first place, right? Like, I love to have these for Christmas decorations and working into wreaths and garlands and things like that. And then just for the beauty of them in the landscape. They do attract birds, but they are toxic. From my understanding of these is that they can be toxic to pets like cats and dogs if you have cats and dogs that like to eat them, but it takes an enormous amount. And even if they got an enormous amount, it would be like it would be like a caffeine overdose, like they probably diarrhea, stomach pain, that sort of thing. It's not something you would die from. So I thought I would mention that. I don't have anything that wants to mess with these. Our cats leave our stuff alone for the most part, so I'm not worried about that. So what I'm going to do right now is get them in the ground. I'm going to go grab some mulch, and then we'll take a look. I got them all planted and they look really good in this area, I think. So I've got mulch on the top, and you can tell that I was using a different color of mulch in the spring when we initially mulched this area. But I think we're going to start in with this stuff now. It's more natural. There's no dyes in it. So until we have a chance to do the whole thing, it's going to look a little patchy for a little bit, but the plants should be happy. I've got them all watered in. And the thing that you have to do in the fall, so I've got them watered now, if you have a really dry or windy spell, you need to make sure to come out and give them a little bit of water with a watering can or however you need to do that. Like in our area for the next 10 days, there's no rain, no moisture at all. So I'll probably come out in 5, 6, 7 days, something like that, come finger test the soil, see what kind of moisture levels in there, and I may give them a little bit more of a drink. Of course, they don't need a ton of water this time of year because they're not utilizing it. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful. Just, you know, hearing a few different options on what you can do with containerized plants this time of year. I hope it gave you more confidence on what you can do if you find yourself in the same situation that I'm in or was in this morning. So anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.